Welcome back. Would you allow your spouse to sleep with other people, let me finish this, if you were able to do the same thing? Well, in Australia, 1 in 3 marriages end in divorce, costing the economy around $14 billion in assistance payments and court costs.
So in order to reignite the spark, could we see more people moving away from traditional marriages and instead consider having an open relationship? For more on this, we are joined by psychologist Clare Mann. Clare, lovely to have you with us. What do you think? Is it human nature to be monogamous?
Well, let's define human nature. Human nature, we're having some sort of agreement that all humans share the same feelings, thoughts, actions, and that it's sort of general amongst the population. And to be monogamous, of course, means you've got one partner for life or over an extended period of time, serial monogamy. The fact that we see so many variations, I think, is therefore it's up for question as to whether this is normal amongst most people.
And have you ever witnessed anybody that can have a polyamorous relationship, which is having multiple partners in an intimate sense, but you're not married?
Yes.
Have you witnessed couples that are able to do that successfully long term?
Well, it depends what we mean by long term, certainly over months or maybe years. But it's a very interesting thing that seems to happen. If they both agree that this is okay, everything seems to go fine. But what happens if suddenly one partner feels the other person stepped outside the boundaries, they've gone for lunch or had a cup of coffee with the other person, they get more upset with that because it's denoting some sort of intimacy or they're falling in love with the other person than actually having sex with them.
Do you think there are any benefits to an open relationship?
Well, you certainly can't say to your partner that they've deceived you, of course. I mean, a lot of unhappiness in relationships happens when we have infidelity. In other words, having sexual relationships with other people. And the person often is really upset because they said, well, we had a common understanding. Although most people don't actually discuss the rules of marriage. They assume that this is what we do, and they're relying really on social, cultural and personal belief systems that are never actually discussed.
And where do those belief systems sort of stem from, those ideas of marriage that we have, that it's always going to be monogamous?
Yes, well, I'm not a historian, but if we look back over history, marriage really began as more of an economic arrangement. It makes sense, of course, that we have couplings and we have people coming together largely to look after children. We don't want mothers being left holding the baby literally. Fantastic book written by sociologist Marilyn Yalom in the US called The History of the Wife, which actually shows this whole notion changing. But there was a time, particularly in the Christian tradition, when marriage was literally created as a romantic notion. In fact, we hear things still in religious services. A wife must cleave to her husband in the same way that Christ cleaved to the church. So it was actually an attempt, really, to romanticize the relationship. Now, of course, we're all brought up in a certain culture. We come to expect things. We can't imagine what it's like to be somewhere else. So we say, well, this is human nature. But is it?
You talk about the financial aspect. Divorce, I think we mentioned, costs the economy more than $14 billion a year. Do you think if you've got the open relationship, it helps save money for the economy?
Well, not necessarily. I think we have a whole question whether the government or society should be paying for the consequences of people's choices. But I think open relationships, whilst they might reduce sort of costs, I guess, of breakdown of, legal aid and that sort of thing, there's still cost involved in the children of those unions, of course, that have a public bill often, as people can't support themselves individually. But it does come with problems. As I say, there's still boundaries around open relationships. And there's often, in my practice as a psychologist, I see people that will often go along with it for a certain amount of time, and then one person grows tired of it, this open relationship. In fact, sometimes they even engage in parties or play parties, as we say, so to speak. My own view is that if people are both agreeing to that and it's acceptable, is really just look at the whole, are you really choosing this wisely? Is it really what you want? Are you going along with it because one husband, partner, male or female, is demanding it, but you don't want to lose the person, so you sort of conform. And in all things in relationships, of course, when we're not truly showing up and saying what we want, we're going to run into trouble down the line.
I mean, it's terrific if two people can absolutely agree to it,
sure.
or agree to anything, but that doesn't happen that often, that two people can be 100% aligned on something. And I suppose with this, there is just so many trust issues that are involved in that, and the stakes are so high, particularly if kids are involved.
Absolutely. I don't think we know the real price of our sexual freedom. We think we can be really open-minded, but there's a lot of emotions involved that are connected with that, and biological reactions of we try to respond to connect with people and engage. When we feel someone is infiltrating in our relationship with our partner, there's all sorts of problems result.
Claire, what would be advice to couples who are thinking, you know what, I want to try that?
Yeah, well, have a real discussion, you know, really communicate about what is going on here and be open about it and say your real feelings, even when it might cost you the relationship, so to speak. Talk about the boundaries. Where does it begin and end, what you're allowing the other person to do? But ask yourself, is that really what I want? Or am I going along with some influence either of my partner, or I think I should be modern, this is what everyone does. What do you want to do?
We have had some terrific couples on this program that have been able to do it, and there are children involved, and there's just more love that's spread around, and you know, and that's terrific if you can make it work for you.
And I think for children, you know, children want love and security, and we know a lot of traditional relationships don't provide that. So those children have problems too. Who does it matter? As long as you love someone
as you
and you're
guys are
true
happy,
to them,
who are
that's
we
all
to
about
say
good
what it should
relationships.
look like?
Absolutely.
Claire, thank you so much. Excuse me.